Okay, so we got 5.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 is here. Okay. And 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you take the ticket.
I take it completely, or I try to read
yeah,
it
you
while
take
it's
it
still.
off.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure if this is philosophy, really. This is more like psychology or something. Does a person's name influence the person they become? I don't know. Maybe yes and maybe no, but
What's your opinion on it?
my opinion, since I'm not a determinist, I believe in free will. Okay, that's back to you. I believe in free will. I don't think that this is necessarily true.
Okay.
Okay, so we choose who we are. Okay, Jean-Paul Sartre says we are condemned to be free. So
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so another one, correct? 2. Okay, 1 and 2. Let's see what I get here. Looks like fortune cookies. Is a life that focuses. Here is a philosophical one. Is a life that focuses on avoiding pain and seeking out pleasure a good and worthwhile life. Why or why not? I would say no, it isn't. Okay, unless you are a hedonist, of course. For a very simple reason, because pleasure and pain are never indications of happiness.
Okay.
So sometimes happiness comes with a certain level and measure of pain. Okay, because you want to be virtuous or moral. And this is something, for instance, that both Aristotle and Kant would agree upon, despite the difference in their systems of ethics. So Aristotle would say happiness is never measured by the degree of pleasure that one achieves, because happiness has to do with, according to him, was hitting the mean, which is actualization of our rational spirit. And sometimes hitting the mean means giving up certain pleasures. Okay? Plus, sometimes pleasure and maximizing pleasure brings more harm than happiness. So happiness, if we take happiness in the Aristotelian sense, which is that which is pursued in itself and has nothing beyond it, it cannot be measured by pleasure and pain, because pleasure and pain are they infinitely extend. I mean, you can always pursue pleasure and pain endlessly. Someone like Kant would say, of course not. Kant is more strict about it, in the sense that pleasure has to do with our physical constitution, and our moral decisions shouldn't be concerned with that.
Okay.
Okay, makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Why do we judge ourselves by our intentions, but judge others by their actions? Very good question. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's actually a very good question. I mean, again, back to Kant. Kant says that all morality is defined by intention rather than by the action itself, because it doesn't matter once the action happens, it doesn't matter what the action leads to. It just what makes an action moral is the maxim or the intention that was made while the rational agent was deciding on taking that action. And then once you do the action, you never know, because sometimes you intend something moral and disasters happen.
Yeah.
Or you do something, you fulfill a promise to a friend, and then fulfilling that promise is seen as something baloney. But the interesting thing about that question is, like, Why do we measure our actions by our intentions but judge others by actions? I think because nowadays we are way more externally oriented. So we don't take intention seriously. So what happens is that we are very loose when it comes to our own intentions. And we are very strict with others when it comes to their own actions.
Yeah.
So, but if we take our intention seriously, we should judge ourselves by our intentions and be very skeptic about the intentions of others in order to give them benefit of the doubt. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. You want me to hold it?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So if you could teach everyone in the world one concept, what concept would have the biggest positive impact? Oh, wow. On humanity. All of human. Wow.
It's a big one.
That needs a real Buddha.
Yeah.
I'm not a Buddha. Okay. It needs one of those Buddhist monks. You know?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I remember
big
Jim
one.
Carrey in Ace Ventura. You know that movie? When he went to the monks. Anyway. So, okay, what would be the concept that have the biggest positive impact on you? I would say rationality.
Okay.
Be reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, because, but the question is what kind of rationality, and this is a quest that people should seek, but it seems to me that people have given up on. Again, this is one of the problems of postmodernism, is that people associate certain evils with rationality. And yes, it's true that some modern ideas about reason has caused many problems, but this should not take away the importance of rationality, because if you take it away, what will be left?
Yeah, not much.
Yeah, personal interest,
Yeah.
and then we fight with each others, and everything turns into an ideological warfare based on sensations and emotions, relative emotions of everyone, and that would be disastrous. So that would be, at this moment in history, to me, that would be the most important concept.
Yeah.
But again, we have to be very careful about what kind of rationality we want to.
Yeah.
5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Here you go. 1 second. Sorry.
It's like not focusing. Okay.
Okay. What is the best way for a person to attain happiness? Again, wow. Okay. In connection with what I said earlier, since I chose two, Aristotle and Kant, I would say happiness comes. In ethics, people usually talk about the difference between the agent and the patient. That is, the agent of the ethical action and the ultimate object of the ethical action. I think that it all comes down to the person, to be frank with you. So two things: be be rational, okay, hit the mean, as Aristotle said, and try always to think in. So this would be a lesson I learned from Aristotle. Another lesson I learned from Kant is don't connect it with your own personal interests.
Yeah.
I think that's a very deep question in cognitive philosophy of mind. How do I answer this one? Can you prove that other people have consciousness? I think part of our consciousness is that we assume that other rational agents are conscious. Okay? So we cannot operate in the world without assuming that other rational beings are not conscious, because you are always assuming consciousness I mean, of course, it depends what you mean by consciousness. Do you mean awareness?
I don't know. I kind of left it up to your interpretation of
Okay.
consciousness.
Okay, that's a very challenging question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one way, for instance, okay, here's one way, for instance, is language.
Mhm.
Okay, so language is, I think, it's a means through which we express consciousness
Mhm.
intersubjectively with each other. So, so this is, in other words, that we prove to each other that we are conscious of the same thing, and whenever we are conscious of a specific object, we can talk about it meaningfully
Mhm.
with each other. But I think, and this is to me the more maybe fundamental part to your question, is that our consciousness assumes that there are other conscious beings
Mhm.
around us, because if we don't do that, all the system of language and science would collapse.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if you don't assume that other people are conscious like you,
Mhm.
then why do we need to communicate and hence invent languages?
Mhm.
And then the other thing is, how do we, how can we be certain of things? Okay, so our entire system of knowledge assumes an element of intersubjectivity when it comes to consciousness.
Mhm.
I mean by intersubjectivity, other consciousness that share the same consciousness with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an excellent question. Sure. I mean, I wouldn't say have morals. Okay, you wanna get?
Oh yeah. Mm, can animals have morals? Okay.
Can animals have morals? Morality was always seen as something very deeply human because it concerns choice, and animals are always seen to be acting upon instinct
Mhm.
rather than choice. I mean, I'm not a biologist,
Mhm.
but I know many biologists talk about animals having certain intelligence.
Mhm.
Actually, I saw, speaking of this, it's very interesting because a friend was shared on Facebook last night. One of my teachers back at Emory actually shared a very interesting video about the intelligence of crows.
Oh yeah, they're so smart.
Yes, I
Mhm.
never knew that.
Yeah.
Forgive my ignorance,
Oh
but
no.
I was fascinating.
Yeah.
And they put them into tests, and they managed to make choices very smartly about things. So, if animals, okay, let me put it this way: if animals have morality,
Mhm.
I would say their moral choices are much easier than us.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's our, and this is not because of a privilege that we have over them. I think it's because the more sophisticated your intelligence is,
Mhm.
the more the propensity is for you to mess up things.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
So, so I think that they are actually, in that sense, they are morally privileged.
Yeah.
Okay. But you see, classical philosophers, even up to the 19th century or early 20th century, if you ask any of them that question, they wouldn't accept it.
Mhm.
Like if you ask Kant or even people after Kant, they say, of course not. Animals are just acting on instinct. But now science is teaching us all of these things
Mhm.
about animals having rationality and making choices and decisions.
Yeah.
I would say, but since we have more sophisticated intelligence, I think our decisions are more sophisticated, and hence we tend to mess up our morality way easier than they do.
Mhm.
So that would be my answer.
Yeah.